If you're just joining, welcome. Please go to the chat box. Identify, using the emojis, identify the countries here and put on the chat box if you've identified the countries using the emoji. So I'm seeing Cuba, I'm seeing Peru. Like it's just, you're selecting the number of countries, like what? Okay, first, I'm seeing Peru, Cuba. You did not put number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. There are 5. Okay, David, thank you. Number 1, Peru. Okay, if you say so. Amaka said number 2 is Cuba. Peru, Cuba, Peru, Cuba, Peru, Cuba. So it's just Peru and Cuba that I'm saying. Oh. Number 3, number 4, number 5. Number 3, Qatar. Wow. Wow. How did you get there? Akman said number 2, Ireland. Okay, Iceland. Okay, so Precious, we're playing an activity using the emojis, identify the countries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just put it down like that. So some people are guessing. I'm seeing some people are trying. Some people are trying. Number 1, Madagascar. I was sick of Madagascar, number 1. How? Number 1, Nigeria. I don't think Nigeria is there. Okay, number 5, Madagascar. Okay. Okay, so Amaka says Peru, Cuba, Haiti, Angola, and Madagascar. Almost. So we have same thing with Aisha. Peru. Nobody has gotten it complete. Oh. Peru, Ireland, Qatar. Not sure of 4 and 5. Oh, we'll be sure soon.
Good evening.
Hola, Peru, Cuba, Haiti.
Let's see my garden.
Somebody said it's autocorrect. So autocorrect, that's why number 1 became Madagascar. Okay. Is that all? We tried. Give yourself a round of applause. And let's see if we have a winner. Somebody trying again. Okay. Number 3 is Turkey. Turkey. There's hand. Say Turkey. So we have Peru, Cuba, Haiti, Andorra, Madagascar, Temilolua. This we have done it. I said it's Nigeria because the pear is green. Okay. All right. So let's just see the final answer. And I think now this is our answer. So can someone just explain why? Let's share. Why is number 1 Peru? What was your, so in case someone wants to try it in their classroom or in their online virtual classroom or physical classroom or in a training, let them know why. Okay, Temila, let's say peer plus you, so Peru, but just to. All right, correct. You are correct. So let's go to the second one. Why is it Cuba? It's a cube, a form of a cube plus a, Cuba. Thank you so much. Let's move to the third one. Why is it Haiti? Hi plus T. Hi, like you're waving your hand. Hi. You're greeting someone. Hi. Then T. Hi T. Hi T. Thank you. Let's go to Ando. I didn't even know that this was the name of a country. Yes, it has to do with joining the sound. Thank you. Andorra. So there's there's a door, and there's a. Andorra. What about Madagascar? So there's an angry bird here, Abby. An angry bird here that is mad. Then there's a gas station, and there's Madagascar. So now this is for everybody that wants to try and they were confused on what to do. Please, let's mute. Thank you. And they were trying, and this is the best. So we're going to have another set. Now we've understood how the game works. So I expect everybody to give me the answers in like 2 minutes. Are we ready? If you're ready, say I'm ready. We've explained it. So if you're ready for the next set and you are sure you're going to be like in a minute, you're done. Okay. Okay. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Hey, I've put answer here already. Before this one. So anyway, it's not bad. People do not see the answer as fast as possible. Let's start. The timer started though. 1 minute. First person to type. 5 of them. 50 seconds. Five of them. Oh, Becky, you're putting one. Precious, you're putting one. 5 of them. 40 seconds. Thirty seconds. First 5. First person to type the first 5. 20 seconds. I'm seeing first 3. Temitope, well done. Still first 3. Olajide, I know this one. Number 3 is Jamaica. Every other one you sort out yourself, Abi. All right, David. David, number 4, you don't know. Okay, you tried. Well done. Somebody will help you out with number 4. I think someone here can guess number 4, so you just add it to your score. It's time up. Oh. Maka said number 4 is okra. He said number 4 is okra.
This one's never. I don't know what.
Precious, how did you see Ukraine? Like, how now?
We'll get 4 fish. But this one is 5. I was even surprised. This one.
All right,
the
let me
guy.
just give us the answer so we can start our day. Please, let's meet ourselves. The umbrella for me and Abi, number 4 is umbrella. I've seen Japan, I've seen okra, I've seen umbrella, I've seen okra. My word. All right, let's just see what number 5 is. Number 4 is all about, because we all got the other ones, right? Sorry. I'm supposed to go back. Okay. So we all got Iceland, Thailand, Jamaica, though some people were putting Japan, and United Kingdom. But this number 4, Chile. So why do you think it's Chile? Can someone share? Why did they put chili pepper? Because of chili pepper, they now made it Chile. Oh my God. There's no way, right? That's why I added this. Because that one thing I started, it's looking like umbrella, it's looking like okra, it's looking like different things. And you won't even know. But yeah, that's the fun of it. So thank you so much for everyone that participated in the game. Yeah, you tried. Amaka, you tried. I clap for you. I clap for you. Clap for you. Atarudo is there. Yes, Olajide Atarudo is there. I clap for you. Okay, they would have added red color, Emmanuel. So the red color would have made you know that it's chili pepper, abi? I understand. Next time, I will tell them to add it. Okay, so how did you feel after the game? How are you feeling? Are you ready for today's session? It's feedback time. Feedback time, guys. How are we feeling? How are we feeling? How are we feeling? How are we feeling? You're feeling ready? Okay. How are you feeling? Keep it coming. Keep it coming. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Energized. I like that, Becky. Okay. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. How are you feeling after the game? How are you feeling? Ah, excited. This one is ready. Okay. So I'm going to use this time to introduce the speaker for today. She's a very special person and a friend of the house. I'm going to read her profile first, then we start. So our guest speaker for today is Oladoyin Idowu. She's a mental health professional, a social entrepreneur, and global advocate for dyslexia. She holds a BSc in psychology from Redeemers University, Nigeria, and is a graduate member of the British Psychology Society. With over 8 years of experience advocating for dyslexia and neurodiversity, Oladoyin is the founder of One World Africa Foundation, where she has led initiatives such as the No Dyslexia campaign, reaching over 350,000 individuals across Africa through social media outreach, community programs, educator training, and advocacy in underserved areas. She also serves as head of operations at Serenity Nigeria, providing mental health services to vulnerable communities. Clap for this is a very wonderful profile. Clap for her, please. Oladoyin's expertise spans dyslexia, inclusive education, psychological first aid, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed care, business development, and leadership. Wow, a woman of many shoes. Her work has been featured in documentaries by BBC Africa and filmmaker James Amuta, and she has contributed to publications such as Black, Beautiful, that's Brilliant, and Black, Brilliant, and Dyslexic. She has been recognized by the United Nations Academic Impact for her advocacy work. She is currently pursuing a master's in clinical psychology. Oladoyin is committed to advancing mental health advocacy and integrating it into her work in neurodiversity. Through her work, she contributes to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 3, which is for good health and well-being, and SDG 4, which is for quality education.
Yeah.
Apologies, my Nigerian network kicks me out. Okay, so can you still hear me now? Let me know.
Yes.
I don't even know where I stopped. I don't know where I was locked out. But with standing ovation and every other ovation that we have, like clapping, sitting, I'm already clapping, jumping, smiling, hailing. Let's welcome Oladoyin Idowu to talk on our topic for this week, which is creating an inclusive classroom. Thank you so much, Ma. You are welcome. We really appreciate your presence. Thank you so
much. Can you hear me? Can we hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Right. Having some bit of network difficulty on my end, but I will try to make do as much as possible. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I do appreciate it. I'm excited. I'm always excited to be around teachers because teachers are doing a world of difference in the lives of young people. And it's always an honor to be able to, share the little that I know with, teachers, as well as learn from them as well, because, you're on the field and, you catch it newly every day, you come across this newly every day, and you're in better position to to share insights that we may also not have caught. So it's always amazing. I hope that we can learn from each other. I do like my sessions to be very interactive, also because particularly for this topic, which is creating an inclusive classroom. Creating an inclusive classroom requires for us to know how to create an inclusive classroom. And so I'm hoping that we can, some of us can, volunteer ourselves and help us paint a picture with realities that we have in our own classroom, and we can walk through how to create an inclusive classroom. I'm going to join with another account just so that I can share my slide, because that's on my laptop. So you will see another request in your waiting room. But anyway, I'm hoping that we can, volunteer. Some of us can volunteer ourselves so that we can share insight as to what's going on in our classrooms, and so that whatever, practical strategy that I share with us, it's echoing. Is it just me? Seems to be echoing. Is it just me?
It's better
Can we
now.
still hear me? Okay, perfect. Yes, I think so too. Great. All right. So that whatever strategies we're using in our classrooms is, unique to you. Like, it's useful for you, and it's not us just bringing theories and words and all that. So the first and foremost would be learning objectives for this class. Sorry, it's taking a minute for my laptop to connect so you can see my slides, but I've started, right? So the objectives for this class is, first and foremost, define and describe common learning needs. Common learning needs. I would like to do a poll in the room when we start to even know what are some of the learning needs that we are familiar with. I would also shed some light on less common learning needs as well. Amazingly, this week is the Learning Disability Week. So what I was speaking to more will be more things in the learning disabilities as opposed to physical impairment, like that we're very used to. Another thing that we will be talking about today would be how to identify early signs and flags of learning differences by observing behavior, academic patterns, and emotional cues. All right. Another thing we will be discussing today will be how we can apply practical strategies as well as low-cost teaching strategies. Because sometimes when we talk about practical strategies, I get a lot of teachers say, it's not in their budget, it's not in their stuff. So we would think inwardly, and that's the part where I even want us to try practical sessions where I would talk to you about study materials. Like I can talk about bottle covers, I can talk about paper, and I would like for us to come up with concepts as to what you think you can do to help a student who has a specific learning need with, those tools. And we'll be able to do that if we understand each learning difficulty that these children have. That way we know the kind of solutions that we're supposed to provide for them. Then finally, how to develop personal strategies for inclusive teaching classrooms, which is literally tying into what I earlier said about the general practical low-cost teaching strategies tailored to support learners. So the final one would be developing personal strategies for your own classroom. So we're about to start. For some reason, my laptop is not connecting to the internet, but I guess I'll just share my slides afterwards. It would have been nice for you to see my very beautiful slides because I was hoping that you could see that, but can we still hear me? Are we there?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. My laptop is not connecting to the internet. So I will share my slides afterwards. Right? So if we've heard me so far, I would like to see emojis in the room. I know that we already asked how we're feeling and all that, but I want to know that, before they ask you how we're feeling when we're playing game, but now that we've started the real work, how are you feeling? I'd like to know. Be with me, just emojis are fine. We don't have to type too much. I just like an emoji that describes your emotions at the moment in this room. I just swapped network. Do I sound better? Because I want to choose a class captain that I will be calling specifically to answer my questions. Can you volunteer? I need a volunteer class captain for this class, please.
Volunteer what?
Class captain for this class.
Class captain?
Yes, for my session.
I will volunteer.
Thank you. Please,
Okay, I will
speaking?
volunteer to be one. I'm a
That's
grandmother anyway.
Mulikat, right? Mulikat?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So nothing
Yes.
serious. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to be calling your name instead of waiting to call on everybody when I have any specific questions or stuff. Yeah, not just things like, can you hear me? Am I clear? And things like that.
It's
Nothing out of the ordinary. Thank you so much. So the first thing
You're
on my
welcome.
slide is you don't just teach, you inspire. I like to hope that when I'm speaking to teachers, teachers understand the full extent of what they do, the full capacity of their influence. I like to hope so. So this is just a reminder that you don't just teach. As a teacher, your work is not just to teach, you're to inspire. Another thing is a good teacher is like a candle, and it consumes itself to light the way for others. This sounds quite a lot, right? When you say it consumes himself. But what it's really trying to say is that teaching requires sacrifice, right? Teaching requires sacrifice. For us to be able to teach, we need to be able to apply ourselves. If you're a teacher and you're teaching on the surface, you will miss a lot of things, because sometimes the way you would even catch some learning needs in your classroom is through behavioral cues, emotional cues, rather than just academic patterns, right? We can read academic patterns as well when we're looking at, result, participation in classroom, how they contribute to their assignments and things like that. But that's not the only thing that we have to observe to be able to identify, certain needs that we have in our classroom. So a good teacher is like a candle. It consumes itself to light the way for others, which means you have to be sacrificial as a teacher. The next slide is what are learning needs? I like to throw this into the room. What are learning needs? What do you understand by learning needs? You know, what are learning needs? Any simple one-word response would be fine. What are learning needs? I'm looking at the chat room very quickly. What are learning needs? Are we there? What are learning needs? I need quick answers. What have you all, let's start with, have you heard the word learning needs before? If we have, then what are they? It sounds very simple. It's just an English word, learning and needs. You know, pretty much.
I think
Okay, resources needed for learning, learner's requirement. I need more. Learning
I think
needs.
Mulikat is trying to answer the question.
Okay,
by-
Malika, go ahead.
yeah, I think it's learning with consideration to individual differences.
Okay,
That is the
yes.
need of the learner.
Thank you.
Because the need of a
correct.
particular learner in class, in mathematics class, may
Yeah.
not be the same as the need of that same learner in English class.
True. Yes. Thank you so much for that, Malikat. I have more contributions here that says the different needs of students in the learning process, what you need for learning and learning materials. Thank you so much. These are all correct answers depending on the context, right? Learning needs are resources needed for learning on a context. Learning needs are different needs of students in the classroom in a different context. Specifically, what I'm speaking today is you know, learning needs. This refers to any difficulty or difference in how a person processes, understands, or expresses information. Any difficulty or difference in a person that affects how they process information, how they understand information, how they express information, which would in turn affect how they learn in a typical classroom setting. That is what learning needs are. And this may include challenges with reading, with writing, with attention, with memory, with motor skills, and it often requires adaptation to your teaching methods to help such learners thrive. I'll take it slower now. We have children in our classroom, and we must recognize that children are unique, children are different, right? And even when we are teaching comprehension will be experienced by the students in your classroom in different ways, right? As a teacher, as an English teacher, you might come into the classroom reading a comprehension passage to your student and asking questions, right? You read the same passage to them, you ask questions, but their mode of answering the question or their response to that question may be different, just because they experience that comprehension passage that you read to them in different ways, right? Some of them might, when you're teaching them some subject concept, they're internalizing it or encoding it in their brain through pictures. Some of them, they're encoding it in their brain logically. You can tell a child 1 + 1 = 2, and logically that makes sense. But for another child, 1 + 1 is so abstract that it doesn't make any sense. But if you bring one apple and another apple and you put it together, it will give you 2 apples. That is encoding visual knowledge into a child who understands things visually, right? So in a classroom, we have varied learning needs. We have what? Varied learning needs, because we have different type of children in our classrooms. Different things could cause children to have different learning needs. We have neurodevelopmental conditions. We have neurologically based conditions. We have neurodevelopmental is when we think about the fact that with developmental stages in children are supposed to eat certain milestones, right, in their development. And as they eat that milestones in physical features, they also have to hit some, neurological milestones, right? If anyone has come across newborn babies, you know that there's a time that they don't recognize sound and light. You know that there's a time that they eventually start to see sound and light. You know, there's a time that their names make sense to them. You know that there's a time that they start to talk. So neurodevelopmental is across the different stages of life, right? Because developmental stages is from fetus to death, right? So there is different things that happen at different stages in life for everybody. Even for adults, there's a time that your brain starts to also degenerate as an older person, and it starts to seem as though the person is a baby again. So for every stage of development, there's neurodevelopmental things, that milestones that needs to be had. And due to different reasons, it could be due to issues at birth, it could be due to a myriad of reasons, some things could impact neurodevelopmental conditions. Then we have neurological conditions. Neurological conditions sometimes are also called neurodevelopmental. But neurological is specifically speaking to cases where it's not because a milestone was missed at birth. It's not that there was lack of oxygen at the labor room. It's not because, there was lack of iron or lack of calcium or lack of anything. Despite normal intelligence, despite MRI showing proper brain development, some of these people still struggle to learn. Those are neurological based specific learning disorders, right? And amongst other things. I'm going to speak specifically today to those ones that, it's not obvious. You're not seeing any defect. You're not seeing stammering. You're not seeing staggering. You're not seeing jerkiness, but they look, I don't want to use the word normal because it is overrated, but they look like what a child who has gone through their different normal stages of development. Nothing seems to be off. There's nothing physical, there's no physical impairment that you can see. And despite this, they are still unable to learn. Those are the people that I will be speaking specifically for, because these students are found in your mainstream classrooms. Other children who have physical impairment, some of them get excluded into special schools. But for those who have neurological conditions like dyslexia, like dyscalculia, they're in your mainstream classroom. So it's very important as teachers to know what these conditions are, so you're able to help children like that when you come across them in your classroom. And the beautiful thing is, for the many years you're going to be in teaching, you will meet myriads of conditions, even beyond the ones that I treat today. We have common ones, which I will talk about today. I will also speak about some that are not as common, but there's a lot. So I implore you as teachers to, tax yourself with research, tax yourself with the curiosity so that you're at par with what is happening in the world. And another beautiful thing is that even when you may not have done a research prior to coming across a condition in your classroom, if you have the ear and the sensitivity to know how to, read patterns or take data, you're able to identify when something is an anomaly and when something is not happening the way it should happen. Then you can, build up a case around that to also find a solution, right? So this is saying, prepare yourself prior to it. But even when you don't do your due diligence and prepare prior to it, because sometimes even you prepare and you will still meet something new in your classroom, right? So today's session is hoping to leave you with that curiosity where you learn how to observe observable behavior patterns in your classroom and come up with a conclusion, or at least close to a conclusion as to what might be happening, so that you can start to prefer support, right? So this needs impact reading, impact writing, impact attention, impact memory skill, motor skills rather, and they often require adapted teaching methods to help such learners thrive. My second slide is, what are these common learning needs in the classroom? What are these learning needs in the classroom? Have we heard about autism before? Just with an emoji with thumbs up. Have we had autism before? I want to believe it's common, but I want to just see that statistics. Autism, I just want to see thumbs up reaction. Have we had autism before? Only 2 people? Okay, more people have heard about autism. Thumbs up reaction if you've heard the word autism. Okay. It's more common than the emojis I'm seeing. Should I be concerned? Okay. Okay. Now, have we heard the word dyslexia before? Dyslexia. Dyslexia. Emojis as well. If we've had dyslexia, let me see a thumbs up as well. Thumbs up if we had dyslexia. Okay. Those are very common words. So I'm a bit concerned by the statistics of people that haven't had it. I want to believe that some of us are not responding, but I want to believe that we've mostly had it. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Right. So there is more even beyond dyscalculia, and rather there's more beyond autism and dyslexia, right? So what is autism spectrum disorder? As the word implies, it's on a spectrum to mild, moderate to severe. And this has to do with social communication challenges, inability to respond and react to certain social cues, amongst other things. That's autism spectrum disorder. I'm not going to go into details of each of these disorders. I'm just going to do introductions to them because we're mostly going to focus on creating an inclusive classroom despite what conditions you might have in your classroom. The next, we have dyslexia. Dyslexia is this difficulty with reading, difficulty with decoding and spelling. And when a child has difficulty with reading or decoding words or spelling, it will obviously impact, the ability to study. And when a child is unable to study, then a child cannot learn, right? Encoding is when, someone is trying to pass knowledge onto you, either by reading, by, giving you something to read or speaking to you about it. Your ability to be able to identify the word you're saying, the letters, and make sense of it is the ability to encode it. And make sense of it is that you're not just saying the word, it is forming as a meaning in your head, right? That's encoding and decoding. Those are the things that entails. And children who have dyslexia will struggle with functions like this due to how their brain is wired, right? So it is neurologically based and impacts the ability to learn in a mainstream classroom. Another condition that we have is dysgraphia. Dysgraphia has to do with difficulty with handwriting and written expression. So it's not just handwriting, because sometimes we might focus a lot of intervention on how to write letter A, how to write letter B, how to write letter C, how to write letter D. But it also impacts written expression as well. Your ability to think of something that you want to write and put it down in writing. Sometimes you hear some children say that they have thoughts in their head, but they're struggling to put it in writing. They're struggling to put their thoughts to words. Those are some common, pointers for dysgraphia, right? We also have dyscalculia. Dyscalculia, this is difficulty understanding numbers, time, and mathematical concept. Mathematical concept like direction is also a concept, left and right, up and down, north and south, east and west. Greater than, less than, those are mathematical concept. And children who have dyscalculia would have difficulty understanding numbers, time, and math concept. We also have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, from the name, yes, agraphia. So from the name, we have difficulties with attention, we have difficulties with focus, hyperactivity, or impulsivity, right? And then there's ADD, attention deficit disorder. This is telling you that both ADD and ADHD would have to do with attention and focus. And when you're teaching a child, some of the things that you require for them to be able to do is to focus, right? Pay attention to what you're teaching them so that they can learn. There's some children who struggle to pay attention, and as a result, sorry,
29. 29.
can we mute ourselves, please? Please mute yourself if you're not. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, so lost my train of thought. Okay, ADHD and ADD. Thank you. So difficulties with attention, focus, hyperactivity, or impulsivity. And then there's so many other learning conditions as well that is just not limited to this few. These ones I highlighted because they're the most common that you see in the classroom, right? But there is more. There is so much more. I also highlighted some less common learning needs you see in your classroom. One of it is auditory processing disorder, which is difficulty processing sounds and language. Sometimes people tell me that, they hear an accent. I have an accent. How do I have an accent? Have I lived outside of the country before? And I tell them that, no, I haven't lived outside of the country before. I had to learn language by stressing the phonetic symbols to be able to hear it or tell it apart, because English is such a complicated topic or subject. Sometimes some of these things sound very similarly. We have words that are spelled differently, but are spelled alike, right? And things like that. So sometimes it depends on how you teach it. Some children would miss it, right? And so for someone like me, I had to learn. I have dyslexia. I don't know if that showed up in my bio. I'm not sure if it did, but I'm dyslexic, right? And as a child who has dyslexia, I struggled with, things like that. And so in strategies on helping myself, I had to learn in a certain way to help myself learn. And that's why today I'm standing here having gone through the different levels of education, which is to tell you that children who have these conditions can thrive if only you teach them the right way. Another condition that is not as common, but is still common, is developmental language disorder. This is a language-based learning delay, right? Language is one of the requirements, language development is one of the requirements for a child to be able to learn to read, right? And when there is a language-based delay, that would also impact, it would trickle down into other things. We also have dysprasia. Dysprasia, this has to do with motor coordination difficulty. You know that you need coordination to be able to learn, especially as simple as fine motor and gross motor skills. If you need to write, you require, proper finger dexterity to be able to flexibly hold a pen, to be able to, do things that would require you to write or draw or do things like that. And when learning also requires all your sense organs, right? Sometimes you're learning something and you require to do some kinesthetic expressions. So coordination is also part of learning. Today, I'm not going to be talking about the science of reading or the science of learning, but that's also another topic that I think that as teachers, you should familiarize yourself with so that you understand the different organs in the body or how learning works, right? When you understand how learning works, you're also able to pay attention to when there's a difference in when there's an anomaly in what is supposed to be happening, right? So where's the next one? Okay. When there's an anomaly in what is supposed to be happening in your classroom. Now, some of these conditions that I've also shared, they also happen comorbidly. So comorbidly, I don't think comorbidly is the right word, but they have comorbid ways that they show themselves. In what sense? The fact that, a child can have both autism and dyslexia. A child can have dyslexia and dyscalculia and dysgraphia. A child can have dyslexia and ADHD. So it's very important that you pay attention as teachers to be able to understand these different patterns so that you can catch it and help, right? So the next thing on my slide is, so I'm not going to go into each of these conditions one after the other because I don't have that time for it, but we're just going to go straight into, give me a second, please. Okay, this is me. My next slide is explaining this even further. So I've already explained dyslexia again as difficulty with reading, spelling, phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is when you're teaching a child to read, especially if you're in lower classroom, you know that reading has to transition from knowledge of letter and sound to blending to letter words, to letter stories. I'm skipping things, by the way, but blending to letter stories, to comprehension and things like that. Now, with children with dyslexia, they will struggle at different points in these things, but it can be solved if you understand that, oh, maybe for instance, this child is struggling with comprehension, then you know that you're supposed to tackle comprehension. If you know that, oh, this child is struggling with letter reversal in writing, then you know that that's what you're tackling, right? So you just need to be able to pay attention to what a child might potentially be struggling with so that you can properly help to solve the problem. Another thing is they under dyslexia as well, they may read slowly. Children with dyslexia may read slowly, they may mix up letters. A lot of misconception that I hear about dyslexia is when I ask people, what is dyslexia? They say when the letters are dancing. Right, that's one of the most common depiction of dyslexia, even on the internet. If you type dyslexia code, you will see a lot of letter reversals. That's what's happening, letter reversals. And I've also had someone ask me before that, is it that when I'm looking at the paper, the letters are dancing horizontal or they're doing? I'm like, yo, no, the letters are not dancing horizontal. But one of the ways that I, try to explain this, in the most relatable way is when you see someone that you have seen before, like when you see a stranger that you've seen, someone you don't know very well, you've seen this person's face before, right? And you've seen the person somewhere. Like, I've seen this face before. I don't recognize this face, but it's familiar. And so it's like a blur because, you're trying to, go back to where you've seen this face. And it's like a blur of different interactions. Sometimes your brain is flashing back to different ways you possibly have seen the person. Sometimes your brain is not even presenting any information to you. That's how it looks like when you teach a child letters and they do not recognize the letters. So that's why we hear the most common description of the letters are dancing. But no, the letters are not dancing. I like to see emojis in the room so I know that we're still here and I haven't bored you out of the room. Just emojis so I know you're still with me. And if I'm speaking too fast as well, you can let me know so that I can slow down as well. Do I only have Becky and Emmanuel in this class? Okay, thank you, Fumi. Thank you, Alice. All right, then we carry on. Thank you so much. Right, so, and it's not a sign of low intelligence. We found that children who have dyslexia often have above average intelligence quotient. Thank you so much for that. Often have above average to average intelligence quotient. And so it's not an issue of intelligence, So sometimes I hear a lot of maybe the person should go and learn trade. Maybe school is not cut out for the person. School will not be cut out for the person if you don't teach the person how they learn. So it's not every case of learning difficulty that should end in vocational learning. Children with learning needs would also struggle in vocational learning if they're not taught in the way that they're supposed to be taught, right? Buttressing into dyscalculia as well is struggles with understanding numbers, math symbols, time, money. Money is a number concept. Another thing is you may not remember basic mathematical fact or tell time from an analog clock. Till date, I cannot tell time from an analog clock. It has to be digital because for some reason, I can tell it if I take my time to count it, but I don't think I'm supposed to be doing that to myself at this age and time when they're digital clocks, right? But it also took me some time to be able to learn that. And that's a real thing. It's not a spiritual problem. It's not a case to take to the pastor. It's a case for you to pay attention to so you can start to teach strategies. Some of the strategies that I use now as an adult are strategies that I had to teach myself to adapt, but they could have taught me in the class. Right? But it wasn't done because my teachers did not know what I was dealing with. So, they may struggle with even knowing that after Monday is Tuesday, after Tuesday is Wednesday. Those are mathematical concepts because, there's a progression. And for dysgraphia, we have difficulty with handwriting, with spelling, with organizing thoughts on paper. Right? So with dysgraphia, we always end as handwriting. Let's get that handwriting book. And let's teach ABC, but there is more to it. That's why I literally would implore you to please, go ahead and learn more about these conditions. For ADHD, this has to do with inattention, impulsivity, restlessness, trouble following instructions. Those are the things that are common with, ADHD. And this is oftentimes misunderstood as an issue with discipline. You will say, oh, that child is just stubborn. That child doesn't want to listen. Let's flog the living daylights out of that child since they will not sit still. Some children with ADHD, you literally need to adapt your classroom in a way that even keeps them moving around. You can appoint them as class captains sometimes on an activity and have them be doing the moving, but ensure that you're structuring their learning, not that you appoint them to exclude them, right? Because you know they won't sit still. So you say, okay, let that person go and be cleaning the board. Let that person go and be throwing dustbin, or let that person go and do something. If you don't adapt your teaching to accommodate that movement, then that child will end up coming to school for that day without learning anything. Am I making any sense? Emojis in the room. I like my class to be interactive. I like to know that I haven't lost us, because sometimes some of these concepts are very new, and I just like to know that we're together.
Thank you so much. I am with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right.
You can proceed, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. If you have any questions as well, you can drop them in the chat box. I'm sure that there'll be time to answer questions at the end of the session. So after addressing these different learning needs, like I mentioned, there are different learning needs in your classroom. But what are the ways to know when a child has a need in your class? Data. Data is the answer. That's how to know when you have a child in your classroom who has a need. You need to be able, as a teacher, you need to be able to gather data. Gather data, what does that mean? Gather data is, you need to be able to pay attention to patterns. As teachers, we're one of the first set of people that come across these conditions. We're with these children all the time. So we're one of the first set of people that will come across, these conditions. And data simply means that, when you teach a child in the classroom, the one, and they're maybe writing their notes from the board, the ones who you clean the board, and by the time you check their note, they were not able to write anything. The ones who were able to write something. The ones that even when they were able to write is illegible, you cannot read it. The ones that you're teaching a mathematical concept and you're asking questions and cannot answer, and the ones that can answer. Those are data. And when you gather data is not to be vindictive. I know teachers who, as a matter of fact, use the data for mean things. I was a victim of that. I have my teachers who will literally gather my data so that they can call me out on the assembly to embarrass me. And that's not a good way to motivate a child. Corporal punishment because of inability to learn is not a good way to motivate a child, because you're going to leave their child with scars and self-esteem issues and all the psychological conditions that they're going to carry with themselves even long after they've left your classroom. I'm speaking from experience. So please, teachers, if you've been doing that before, I would like to implore you to please stop doing that. You cannot get that data to be vindictive. You cannot gather data to use to embarrass the child. You cannot do that. It is not nice. It is unkind. And whatever you do as a teacher will literally make or mar the child that you're working with, right? So data, again, is paying attention to the different patterns. What is required, what is the standard for your classroom. That, if you're teaching primary 1, for instance, the topics you're supposed to cover and the curriculum. Those are, ways to gather data, and the appropriate age, chronological class age for certain classes. And then, but despite all this, despite your adequate instruction, despite using your teaching instruction, there are just some students who struggle differently. So you need to gather data to be able to know what exactly do they struggle with, in what ways do they struggle, so that you are able to identify, okay, so I've seen these characteristics. So under what does this fall under? Does this fall under dyslexia? Does this fall under dyscalculia? Does this fall under a comorbid condition like dyslexia and ADHD? Is when you are able to identify that you're able to provide support. Are you with me?
Yes.
Thank you. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So behavior is a clue, not a problem. Sometimes children end up throwing tantrums because they feel neglected, or also because they are flustered or embarrassed. Imagine a child in a classroom where we're teaching, right? And everybody seems to be learning and everybody seems to be participating. And you're even a teacher who likes to collect feedback. And the student knows, oh, this teacher will soon turn back and ask who has learned and call my name. Before you call my name and it is revealed that I'm unable to learn, how about I throw tantrum and scatter your classroom, just so that we can take the attention away from the issue. So I know that when we have learning needs in our classroom, some of them show up as behavioral problems. But I say it again, that behavior is a clue, is not a problem. Pay attention to these behavioral needs that you have in your classroom. Pay attention to at what point, even with the behavior, you can notice the pattern, take data. Jegede always throws tantrum in my class, but what's happening in the periods that Jegede throws tantrum? Are we taking mathematics? Are we taking English? What's happening? Or is, even when Jegede is known for throwing tantrums from morning till night, he says something. And sometimes it may not be learning needs, it may be emotional need. It also helps you know when something is happening in the household for the student that you're teaching. So data, again, is a clue, not a problem. Yes? So, skipping learning needs and their signs, because from defining these different learning needs, I'm sure that you can tell some of the signs, but again, I encourage you to please, study more on it. But some other clues for some of these things is you see students who would avoid certain subjects or activities like reading, like copying notes, like mathematics. Those are data-worthy things to note. You often see children who have meltdown or they become emotional around certain tasks. Those are ways to gather data. You hear a lot of I can't see the board. I'm of the opinion that I probably wear glasses today because I said a lot of I can't see the board. And maybe I wasn't supposed to wear the glasses, but I just really couldn't see the board because I couldn't recognize the words. And they just, I ended up being someone who wears glasses to date. So sometimes if you don't pay attention enough to data, you would also come up with wrong conclusions that will lead to, long-term defects that you shouldn't, right? You can come up with the conclusion that a child has ADHD. And again, when I say conclusions, we're not to diagnose, we're to screen as teachers. We're not to diagnose, we have to screen. When we screen, we can now refer. When we screen, we can make recommendations. When we screen, we can also do interventions. Intervention can start even before there's an official diagnosis. You cannot say that because you have a student who struggles to learn to read, you will not do intervention because you want them to first bring you a report of dyslexia to your classroom. That doesn't work. You need to actually start intervention even before diagnosis is done. But screening is part of, data is part of the things that is required to get an accurate diagnosis. Because when we do assessment for things like dyslexia or ADHD, it's literally administering psychometric tools. And so we need to take history. We need to ask the parents, the teachers, of the history of that child. Is all these factors, all this data that contributes to an overall diagnosis. So your contribution in collecting data is very required for us to get the accurate diagnosis, because some of these conditions overlap and some of these conditions also share similar characteristics. So to be able to detect exactly what is what, we need you as teachers to gather data. And when you find data like that, collaborate concept to know as well if that child is having similar experiences, so that way you also know if it has to do with your learning style, teaching methods rather. Also speak to the parents, the family, speak to the child as well. You will get a lot of information from communicating with the child or the students. Wrong of me to assume that we're dealing with just babies. You can get information from communication. So speak. And even when you communicate as well, it speaks to the person that you care. That's also dependent on how you communicate, right? It speaks to the person that you care. And that will do a world of good, because already when you struggle to learn and you see your peers and you see your classmates learning naturally, you start to feel like there's something off. You start to feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And that alone is a lonely journey. So when we find things like empathy, things like care, things like kind communication, that also does a world of good, right? You also find that the student will work much slower or faster than their peers, right? You find that they're reluctant to come to school, or when there's an activity, that's when their stomach is spinning them or they want to go to the sick bay. I became Red Cross commandant from going to the sick bay a lot. I started stabbing classes a lot and I started going to the sick bay, and they made me Red Cross commandant because I was efficient in the sick bay. Anyway, where was I? They may seem disorganized or messy. with the way they handle their books or their backpack and all that. I'm using some of these examples so that we know the realities. I'm not a comedian. I'm just really trying to let you know the realities of these things. Some of these things that look minute, that look like something not to pay attention to, they do something to the person, right? To pay attention is what I'm saying. So how can you get data? You track pattern. Sometimes the child is just having a bad day. But if it's consistent over a period of time, then you need to know that is something to look out for. But if you say, oh, it's just today that the person is behaving like that, then it's just a simple case of a bad day. So pattern would help us tell if it's a one-day thing or if it's a continuous thing. You need to compare across the subjects. You need to ask other subject teachers. If you're the one taking all the subjects, you need to compare so that is it just issues with numbers? Is it just issues with oral expressions? Or is it also issues with written expressions? Is it poor writing abilities? You need to find out what those things are so that you can know what is going on. You need to also watch for emotional cues. You need to see if this child or student is always anxious, if they're withdrawn during activities, if they're frustrated or if they're avoidant. Those help to gather data. You need to collaborate with other teachers and parents. Ask them, did you notice this as well? Because it really takes a village to help a child, right? Are you still with me? Emojis. I like to see emojis. Are we still with me? Are we still update? Have I bored you out of the classroom? Thank you. Are we learning anything?
A lot.
Okay, thank you so much.
Despite my years of experience, I'm learning a lot. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to hear. Thank you for that feedback. So I have some case studies here. The purpose of the case study was supposed to be me have you guys read some of these case studies on the screen and put in conclusion what you think that child may be struggling with. But I'm going to read one or two of it and see what you think, right? So let's talk about Chika. Chika is a Primary 5 student, and she oftentimes zones out during reading time. She rarely volunteers to read aloud. Our teachers of the opinion that she doesn't like to try. But when Chika gets, sorry, I'm echoing. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay. Our teachers across board are of the opinion that Chika just doesn't like to read or doesn't like to learn, and they believe that Chika should go and be a baker in a culinary school because she likes cakes. As a teacher, what would you do in a case of Chika? I want to see comments in the chat box.
I missed that, please.
Okay, I'll read it again. Let's talk about Chika. Chika is a Primary 5 student. She oftentimes zones out in the classroom, especially during reading time. She never volunteers to read out loud. Our teachers are of the opinion that she doesn't like school, she's lazy, she doesn't want to try. They believe that Chika should go to a culinary school and become a baker because she likes cakes. As a teacher, what would you do for Chika? Okay, I'm reading something. Yes, you can unmute yourself actually. But let me read this first comment. She was never diagnosed as a teacher. I may recommend for further amazing. Thank you so much. Recommend for further evaluation. Okay. Okay, another comment, please. You can unmute yourself. You can raise up your hands and then I'll call you so that we don't go over ourselves. If you want to speak, please raise up your hand so that I can call you. But I need to know what we're going to do for Chika before we move. Okay, Amaka, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think I would try to incorporate pictures, lots of pictures, and probably videos in the reading process, because in my class I actually have 2 students like that. And what I've done is to create a lot of pictures, eye-catching pictures with lots of colors that will be attractive for the students to be able to grab their attention, to be willing to listen to you. Because you find out that once this is not done, when you're just reading, sometimes they may even doze off and they are out, they are thinking, they can be drawing in their books and they are not with you. But when you bring pictures, videos, examples, sometimes I'll be like, okay, I will turn on the laptop, come and see this, come and see these pictures, come and see these videos. I found that it helps a lot in the learning process for those students. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take Becky.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, so in addition to what Amaka said now, so I'll want to also use her interest to serve as a bait for her in the learning. So if, for instance, she likes cakes and pastries, so we may, whenever I'm teaching, I can include examples of things like that. I believe if she hears something like maybe like 2 cakes, somebody gave fried me addition, you talk about, so I was just saying 1 plus 1, you say 1 cake, Ade has 1 cake and John has 1 cake. How many do they have all together? That won't even trigger our interest. So I'll try to use that's our interest in particular, then talk to our parents, like you said earlier, that once you have identified a need, just collaborate. She doesn't need to leave school to learn and she doesn't need to leave school if she wants to be a baker or a chef. So she can still do that inside the school environment. So, the parent might not know that, but I as a teacher will know that what is the best for her. So most times we teachers need to look outside the classroom. Everything is not all about math and English. So there are some children that they've used their interest to get them to stay in the classroom and learn what you want them to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky, for sharing that. I appreciate your feedback. So I like that we've jumped into intervention, but we quickly jumped past gathering data. I only mentioned a few things about Chika, but we were not curious enough to do an in-depth study. But somebody in the chat, Alexander, says, I will screen her and suggest for further diagnosis. Also explain to her father. Why are you not explaining to her mother too, Alexander? But good that we should call fathers. Fathers need to participate as well. I agree. I see a lot of mothers in intervention. So, but let's call both father and mother. Let's screen. Let's gather data. But also, let's not wait for a diagnosis before intervention, which is why I'm happy that I'm hearing intervention strategies. And I also like that you said that she can also be a baker while in the classroom, right? She can be in school and learn. I would talk to her. Thank you. And let me read that. I would talk to her first and let's know what's happening to her as well. Great. So speaking to Chika, observing patterns in Chika over a period of time, over different subjects as well, those are required, and taking note of those data and also starting intervention. You can actually get data as well from adjusting the way you teach her. So like infusing, colors or visuals into how you teach and see, she did better with visuals. In your data, you can put it there that, when we teach Chika rather, when we teach Chika with this, she doesn't respond to it. But when we teach her with this, she responds to it. Those are data that are very useful, even when assessment is done, like at the end of the day. But yes, don't wait for an official diagnosis to start intervention for Chika. And I would also like for teachers to not conclude what the future of a child is on behalf of the child. Yes, she likes pastries and she likes baking, but I hear a lot of, if they struggle to learn, maybe they should go and learn vocation. That's not enough. If you've not done your due diligence and changed how they study, and they've not expressed an interest in vocation, maybe try more strategies and figure out how to support that child. So let's talk about instructional strategies, how we can help students across board, different kind of interventions that we can do.
again, remember that it's important to understand each struggle that, each of these conditions. You need to pay attention to what dyslexia looks like, what dyscalculia looks like, what dysgraphia looks like, what autism looks like. You need to pay attention to, because people who have mild autism as well, you will find them in a mainstream classroom, right? So you need to be able to pay attention to these different conditions so that you can teach them based on the gaps in what, like the deficits that they struggle with. A dyslexic person has a deficit with lexia, like lexical and structure, English. Help them with that deficit. Someone who has dyscalculia has a dysfunction or, difficulty with mathematical concept. So if you're doing intervention from there. Another thing is that I liked from what Becky said was she paid attention to the fact that someone like Chika already had an interest, right? So strength-based teaching is also very important. When you pay attention to the strengths of a child and you harness that strength, you will get so much from them, right? So I'm just going to share other strategies that cut across board, because that's also the beautiful thing about inclusion. Like when you teach using certain strategies, it supports every learner in your classroom, even when they have a specific learning need or when they do not. So one of the first things is use multi-sensory teaching instruction. Use multi-sensory teaching instruction in your classroom. I have come across schooling card teaching about multi-sensory teaching a couple of times. So I want to just get an emoji to confirm that we're familiar with multi-sensory teaching instruction. If we have emojis, thumbs up. Multi-sensory teaching instruction. Is it new to us? Have we heard it before? If you have, emojis, please. Multi-sensory teaching instructions. Are we still with me? Have I bored you out of the class? Thank you, Angela. I'm seeing your feedback from earlier. For the evaluation, first of all, since Chika doesn't like reading or speaking in class, it might be dyslexia. We'll introduce using phonics learning and give her extra time, like one-on-one reading practice after talking to the parent. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So multi-sensory teaching instruction, since I'm not hearing back from a lot of us, is when you teach and engage all the sense organs, right? Teaching to engage all the sense organs, engaging the visual, the auditory, and kinesthetic and tactile, right? Visual is used at once, by the way. Most of the time when we say multi-sensory teaching instructions, we hear teachers say, oh, they use visual today. You have to engage all the sense organs at once in one lesson. That's multi-sensory teaching instruction. It's not that today you use video to teach, tomorrow you use text, and you say you are teaching multi-sensory. That's not multi-sensory. That's what it is. That's whatever it is you call it. But multi-sensory teaching instruction is when you engage all the sense organs at once in one lesson. For instance, I'm teaching a class on famine, right? And I come to the board and I come to class that day and I teach famine. And that day I come with, please mute yourselves, please mute yourself. Thank you. And that day I come to class and I have, some materials from the farm to show as visual. And I also write on the board as text. We also read some instructional materials as text. We, touch certain things for tactile. We maybe practice planting a seed for kinesthetic. And from that class, we've had an awesome experience on the knowledge of farming. That is multi-sensory teaching instruction, right? You can look into what Montessori does with teaching, and you can adapt it even for classes. I hear a lot of people say it only stops for primary school. You can do multi-sensory across board. I will use myself as an example as well. As an adult who is in school, who has had to go back to school, to learn in the way that I can learn. One of the ways that I learn is videos, right? If I go to a classroom and my lecturer teaches me in a subject or a concept that I do not understand, which is most of the time, I go back and I break down the concept. I break down the concept and try to understand what this topic is, what the different, concept is covered in that topic. And I do this by watching videos on YouTube. I do this by Googling. I do this by, searching it up online. And one of the ways that I also watch YouTube videos is if you type certain topics on YouTube, it's really if you type it in the way that is encoded in your classroom, you might not find any topic on it. But if you break it down, for instance, the photosynthesis of osmosis, that's not a real thing, but let's say it is. I will first
go to YouTube and type what is photosynthesis and watch videos on photosynthesis, and then watch videos on osmosis, so that when I hear the sentence photosynthesis of osmosis, it makes sense, right? I also say build the vocabulary bank or the mental bank on that concept before you even introduce it. For instance, still talking on photosynthesis of osmosis, not a real thing again, I must add, but I can go into I can, before my class, introduce that concept, the different words and terminologies that might come up in that concept. Today, we'll talk about photosynthesis. Tomorrow, we'll talk about osmosis. Or I share with you resources that just build your memory bank on that concept, so that by the time I'm teaching the concept, it doesn't sound like abstract information. When I'm saying certain things, I can paint a picture in my head because I'm familiar. So it helps to aid understanding, right? And that's me as an adult using multisensory teaching approach. So that's not just, apart from also watching videos on YouTube, one of the best ways to select videos to watch on YouTube as well is, choosing short form videos rather than using long form videos. Long form videos can exhaust you before you get to the point of what you're trying to learn. But when you see videos on 3 minute, 4 minute on one concept, you can afford to watch 5 different videos on photosynthesis and another 5 different video on osmosis. Even if one of the teachers or 2 of teachers don't teach well, out of the 5, somebody would be able to deliver the concept to you in the way that you understand. And I don't end there. I also make infographics or mind maps out of the concept, where I know that if I'm learning about photosynthesis and osmosis, the first thing is to understand photosynthesis. And then maybe in photosynthesis, we have characteristics of photosynthesis, the definition of photosynthesis. I will do mind maps there, right? And, different ways to create resources, and it doesn't end in primary school. That's what I'm highlighting. It doesn't end in primary school, because I always hear, we cannot use counters, we cannot use matches, we cannot use this. Think of the student you're teaching, think of the concept you're trying to teach, and think of the ways that you want to teach it. Even when you're teaching about space, I don't expect that you will go to space, but there are things that you can use to do space. You can bring cotton wool to depict the cloud. You can do different things. And sometimes you can just bring a video into your classroom and have everybody watch it. You can literally have your students also pitch their understanding of a concept to you. And the fact that person A will pitch it in one way and person B will pitch it in another way, it helps to gather the ways that concepts can be learned in a way that provides more assimilation for different people in your classroom. So adapt your teaching is what I'm saying. And it can happen across ages. It does not end at primary school. That's what I was trying to say. Another thing is chunk instructions, because of, especially with children with dyslexia, for instance, who have issues with executive functioning or working memory, it will be required that you don't overload instructions. You don't give a child too much instructions, or if you give instructions, also maybe provide like a written document that they can refer to, because sometimes some activity is not done because they did not hear beyond the first instruction. And it can be embarrassing to be that student who is always calling your attention. Ma, please, what did you say? Please, ma, what's that? Uncle, where's that? Uncle. It can be embarrassing even for the child. So maybe sometimes pre-plan by maybe printing something out or writing it down or something like that, so that even when you've said it verbally, and that also helps, that's also a multisensory way, because you've written it, I'm seeing it, I'm reading it, you're also saying it, I'm hearing it, you are engaging multiple of my sense organs, which can also help and aid my understanding, and it will also help my memory, especially if I'm someone who struggles with remembering and memory, right? Another thing is to pre-teach the vocabulary, which is what I said before. Teach the concept before the class. That way it is not abstract and it's easy to digest. Offer alternative ways to show learning. If you're teaching mathematics, there are alternative ways to show learning. Mathematics does not end on writing on the board. If you're teaching English and the goal of the concept is comprehension, if that's the goal of what you're trying to achieve in your class that day, comprehension requires that the person understands what you have said and can comprehend, which means that the person can understand it by reading it. They can also understand it when you say it, reading it to them. They can also understand it when you use audio notes. The goal at the end is comprehension. So also try to understand what the goals you're trying to achieve per lesson is. That way you're able to judge if you achieve that goal. sometimes we're so fixated on the traditional methods that we lose track of what we're trying to teach. And so the child may not understand the goal of what you're trying to teach, but as long as they can write for you, you are good. That's not okay. That's not okay. That's not even brewing innovators or problem solvers who can think. You're not letting people think. You're making them conform. So please, let's do better. Use clear, consistent routines. Routines help, especially if you're dealing with a case of autism. Let us know what comes after work. Even dyslexia as well. It helps to prepare your mind. Let's know what subject is coming after what subject, or what comes afterwards in your classroom routine. So start each class with a structure. Warm up, recap, new lessons, recap previous lesson before the new lesson to remind those who may have forgotten. The methods are endless. Another thing that you must do apart from teaching strategies is adjust your environmental strategies. One of the first things you can do is you need to create a low distraction sitting area, especially for children who have ADHD. A low distraction sitting area can be when you sit them away from the windows or doors, sit them away from places that requires people to be moving around so that they're not distracted. Those are things that you can do. And you need to actually understand the uniqueness of that child, specifically to know if the child is even someone who will stay seated, right? They are learning that can be play-based, that don't have to be done while seated. You can go on an exploration. You can send that person to the library to go and find information on a subject concept if they will not sit still. There are myriads of methods. You can use visual schedules or timetables as well. Put things in pictures so that they're able to, remember what their schedule would look like. It helps learners who have working memory issues. Provide access for movement breaks, especially for children who have ADHD, so that it can help them regulate their focus and their energy. So give them opportunity to take brain breaks or stretch breaks. As an adult as well who has, dyslexia, if you talk to me for a long period of time, I'll round up soon. I know my time is up. If you talk to me for a long period of time, I get overstimulated and I stop hearing you, even when I'm visibly nodding and saying yes, yes, yes. I've zoned out. So brain breaks so that when someone is overstimulated, they can catch themselves as well and they can stretch. Stretching helps as well. You can do some activity in your classroom where, you can have everybody do like an icebreaker, also tied to the subject that you're teaching. That way it's not stiff, it's not rigid. Allow the use. Okay. Sorry, a call was trying to come in. Allow the use of assistive technology. Allowing assistive technology is not going to it's not a problem. As long as, for me, whenever I introduce assistive technology, one of the first things I try to do is ensure that the concept is understood and can be done without the technology to begin with. But when I know that this person can do it without the technology, then I introduce the assistive technology, as long as it's accessible to them or it's accessible even to me. That's also how I learn as an adult. If I'm trying to use something and I want it to be done faster, I now depend on assistive technology a lot. If you check my phone, there's Grammarly, there's everything, so that when I'm typing and there's a spell problem, someone is spell checking. Sometimes I do audio to text. So because sometimes it's difficult to put myself to words, and so I record myself and it transcribes it for me and even edits it. Those are assistive technology. But can I do it if those things do not exist? Yes. So when you're teaching these things, teach it that they can do it traditionally. But once they have mastered the concept traditionally, you can let them use assistive technology. It will save a lot of time, because sometimes some people genuinely struggle with doing these things. And if you keep them doing it for hours, it's not going to help. Like a child who struggles to write at a good pace, and you keep the child writing, and the child also still struggles to read. How about give her something that can help her with something that's also already pre-written, so that she can focus on reading and understanding the concept that you're trying to teach? But also, after you've ensured that she knows how to write. Are you with me? Thumbs up if you're with me. Thank you very much. There's two more strategies, two more category rather. The third one is emotional and social strategies. The first one was teaching strategy, and we spoke to how you can do your teaching. If we remember, the second one was environment, how you can change your environment and adapt it to help your classroom. The third one is emotional and social strategies. And this is where you can do private corrections. Corrections does not have to be done publicly. You don't have to call a child's results in front of the classroom. You can literally call the child to the corner and say, what happened? You did this way in this particular, what's going on? You don't have to call out their mistakes in front of the class. You would help preserve their dignity and self-esteem if you do that. If you call them privately, not if you call them publicly. Celebrate efforts, not just accuracy. The fact that somebody did not get 100 over 100 does not change the fact that, oh, this time around, they were able to understand how to put the proper definition. Celebrate it, please. Celebrate effort. That will help to build resilience in the child and also build motivation. So if the child a new strategy, amazing, that's brave of you. That's amazing. Good job being a problem solver. It doesn't have to be the way that you want it, please. Use peer buddies strategically as well. Pair them with their peers strategically, not someone who will mock them, and not someone, there's some peers who do well, they're introverted and they're good at studying. They may not do well with you, taxing them to take care of another student. So please pay attention and in how you're using the peer, how you're pairing them. Also name their strengths. We spend a lot of time naming their weaknesses, but name their strength. You did well today. Your responses were very thoughtful. Wow, you have such great problem-solving skills, or you have such great writing ability. Call the strength. Say the strength that they have, so that even one day if they are moping in their room that I cannot read, they can remember that at least they can problem solve. And a win is a win sometimes, please. All right, I'm running up quickly. Also anticipate emotional triggers. Actually, children who, they're prone to having shutdowns and meltdowns, anticipate it. So if you know that reading aloud will cause distress for a child, please don't call them to read aloud. Let them be able to non-verbally opt out of something. Like, let your student be able to, like, you're about to call someone to read aloud and you're seeing somebody who is obviously not able to do it. Maybe they're already becoming anxious. Let that be a cue enough to let it be, not that you want to call them out. You can't challenge me in my classroom. What's that? Come out and read. Say what I say. Sometimes you're doing more harm than good. And I'm not saying don't enforce discipline, but there are ways to enforce discipline without abusing somebody emotionally. There's sometimes that that something is a behavioral problem, not because of a learning issue, but just a behavioral problem, and you want to enforce a discipline by enforcing certain things. That's why pattern and taking data is important. That way you know what is what and what you're dealing with. Finally, I'm going to talk about low-cost inclusive tools. So readers, so text-to-speech is a technological tool, but if you don't have text-to-speech, you can write it out, right? Graphic organizers, if you don't have automatic graphic organizers, you can point out things. You can use sticky note. There's a lot. Timers and alarms for when you're trying to provide routines. You can use timers and alarms. Alternative for using timers and alarms is having you who has a clock or a wristwatch, or things like that, or using stoppers. They're just very things that you can do. Color coding systems, red for verbs, blue for nouns, especially when you're using sticky notes. If you're trying to teach verbs or nouns or adjectives or things like that, you can color code them. Even till date, I read color coded. If I'm reading definition, I can use highlighter markers in yellow. If I'm reading characteristics, I can use highlighter markers in blue. So when I'm reading it, as much as I'm reading in text, my brain is also encoding it, so that sometimes when I even forget, I can remember them color coded in the way that I've encoded it in my head. This is where I want us to actually do a planning in our classroom on how we can help students who have certain conditions. But I know my time is fast spent, so I'm just going to. So my activity was for us to take 2 topics, mathematics and maybe English, and come up with inclusive strategies, paying attention to different possible learning needs that you have in your classroom. So, for instance, you're in a math, you are teaching mathematics, and you have a student with ADHD, you have a student with dyslexia, you have a student with dysgraphia. Pre-anticipate what you need to do to make your class inclusive. Paying attention to the different areas, which is environmental strategies, low-cost tools, emotional strategies, and teaching instructions. I might give that as assignment and have Susan deal with that, but I would love to hear that feedback. But pretty much, that's pretty much, all I have on inclusive classroom. I would again charge us, please pay attention to all these conditions, learn how to take data, learn how to screen. You can only screen if you understand the different conditions, right? If you understand dyslexia, you're able to understand when you see a pattern of dyslexia. So if you don't understand this condition, you cannot screen. You're only able to say, oh, this child cannot read, this child cannot write. Okay, what does that mean, right? Screening only helps when you are able to identify what cluster it falls under, what characteristics does this look like. And in psychology, we have something called the DSM-5. That's also a good tool. Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5. That way, they put different conditions like specific learning disorders and the characteristics that fall under it so that you know you're able to compare. We also have something called the ICD. That's International Classification of Diseases. ICD might not help you as much as DSM will because some of these things are not diseases, right? But both of them can be used to tell when you're screening. And when you find something, refer, call for it to be escalated to a specialist, start to provide intervention. Don't wait till you get an official diagnosis. Speak to parents about it and try to also have a conversation with the student in question in a way that they know that they're supported, right? So you will not always know that a child is struggling. You will not always know what a child is struggling with, but you can train yourself to always be the kind of teacher who would notice, who would ask questions, who will adapt, and who will support. Thank you very much. Susan, are you with us?
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Oladoyin Idowu.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I hope you share this. I hope you'll share everything we have studied today on our email or whatever, so that we can go through it once again, and maybe your email address in case we need to ask some questions.
No problem.
Thank you so much. It's a new learning, and I really appreciate you and the organizers.
Thank you.
More grease to your elbows.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions,
success in your master's degree.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Oladoyin. We truly appreciate you. So we talk for some time. Can you hear me?
It broke at some point, but I think I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. So I said my name is Ali. Susan won't be able to continue with us, so I'm going to be standing in for her. Yeah. So thank you so much for the. In fact, I was so, carried away. Like I didn't want it to finish. I truly appreciate, and I guess every other person to appreciate you. So to continue, I don't know if we have questions for Oladoyin before she leaves the call. Do we have questions? Probably we have maybe a child in our classroom that has something you want to ask for. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Ma, for this section. So, Ma, my question is that in my class, I have a learner that she's stammering. So when we are reading comprehensive passage, maybe I would say 1-1. So sometimes she will know, but to say it out, it will take time. Or sometimes you're asking her questions, she cannot respond back. So sometimes I will be annoyed with her, sometimes I will beat her, sometimes I will just say, let her try to talk like others. So what I'm doing, is it right, or what approach should I do to help her learning so that she can learn well? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for that question. I like to say that when you have a name for what you're dealing with, then you're able to solve the problem, right? So stammering is, you've mentioned stammering as one of the things that the person has. but you need to, maybe look into what is causing the stammering. Stammering can be a natural condition. Stammering can be caused due to low confidence. Stammering can be a myriad of reasons. And so if you take data and find out what the entire cause of it is, so if it's a medical related condition, for instance, maybe something that has to do with a speech pathology issue, you know exactly where to start your intervention from. But if you don't know what it is, then it becomes an isolated incident where you cannot provide solution for it, right? But please, beating the child who is struggling to stammer, it's not going to help the child stop stammering. You need to be patient with the child. You need to be kinder. And sometimes people who stammer also are embarrassed to actually speak in public because they stammer and people would mock them. So either one of the first things you do is to create a conducive classroom environment that is supportive and encourages people. And so a classroom environment that supports and encourages people, for instance, on the day that the girl who stammers is talking, she's not ashamed because she knows that she's amongst classmates who understand and she feels safe. It's a safe space. So you need to normalize that their uniqueness and their differences in your classroom is okay. And when you do that, people who have differences are even able to be fine with it. Like I've gotten to the stage where you cannot mock me with some things I struggle with. I would literally be the first person to tell you that I struggle with it. That's because I've built some level of self-esteem around it. If I had classmates as well, or a classroom environment that was positive, that would always say, it's okay to be this, it's okay to be that, and encourages, and maybe the day she's speaking, everybody's clapping or encouraging, those are things that can be done, So, but first and foremost, know what exactly is causing the stammering so that you can create intervention or a solution from the pain point. It's not just doing general things. So that's what I would say. Issues with speech can lead to stammering. And she's not doing it on purpose. So please pay attention to it and be kinder. Thank you. I see another hand up, Chichi Lopa.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Oladoyin. Thank you for the section. I really appreciate it so much. So my question is, in my class, I have at least like 41 learners in my class, and most of them are struggling with reading, especially reading and comprehension, which is more important for these learners. So when I have like 41 learners in my class, look at the volume at which the learners are much, and how to make them comprehend what we are teaching them, what they ought to learn when it comes to reading ability. Now, what I have paired those learners according to their learning ability, but it seems that something is still not right with these learners, despite the fact that I chose a teacher among those learners that I believe that they are more than average learners class. But those learners that are struggling with reading tends to find it difficult, despite all my effort to teach them, to train them, to talk to them, I've given them all my best.
Yeah.
But it seems that nothing is just happening because they're in primary 3, and I felt like they've not been learning all this right from primary 1, primary 2. So to change them now becomes a problem for me, and I don't want to leave them just the way the other teachers have been leaving them to come to the next class. What do you think I can do to make this and to impart much knowledge so that they can be able to read fluently? At least they can be able to read and understand. They can be able to comprehend whatever they want to read to their best of the understanding. Please,
Thank
can
you for
you
that
please
question.
enlighten?
Yeah.
Idowu,
So
hello.
yeah.
As a trained teacher, before
Can
your
I
own
want to
response.
answer a question before.
Okay.
Okay,
I
you
wanted to
want to answer that
contribute to
question?
the answer. Yes, to
Okay,
the
great.
best
Okay,
of
sorry. I
my
thought you wanted to ask me
to the
another question.
best
Can I
of
ask me
my
another question?
knowledge.
No, go
Okay,
ahead.
to the best of my knowledge, primary 1 to 3 are supposed to be taught in their mother tongue first. In the national policy on education, that is what it's supposed, that's how it's supposed to be. So learning disability, I don't think it's related to what you taught us today. Those children, I don't think they are children that needed inclusive method of teaching. It's just a setback, maybe from their background, maybe their parents don't speak English, because we are so spoiled these days. Instead of us teaching our children our mother tongue, we prefer to teach them English. And from nursery to primary 1 to 3, they are supposed to learn in their mother tongue. So she should check that and see their home background. Maybe their parents don't speak any English. So
Thank
it may
you for
not
that,
be.
Malika.
Okay. No.
Okay, so to respond to this is two things. So when we say that, remember that I said that learning needs, there are common learning needs like dyslexia, dyscalculia, and then there are also other learning needs that may be emotionally based. It may also be, the fact that they lack instructional materials. For instance, I always tell people definition of dyslexia is when a person or a child struggles to read and write despite adequate learning instruction, right? So, but I still think that intervention can be done whether or not it's dyslexia, whether or not it's ADHD, whether or not it's anything, because the goal for every learner is that they come to school and they're able to learn. So yes, not all of them will have a diagnosis, not all of them will fall under the criteria of a learning disorder, but solution must be done, right? And now solution can be a myriad of things. Solution can be exploring alternative ways to teaching, comprehension. If the concept you're trying to teach is reading English language, then you need to teach them in English. But if comprehension is a problem, for instance, then you can actually explore teaching them in their mother tongue and see what difference that makes. But specifically for your class, that is a large group, like it's a large class. I know that, it's oftentimes difficult sometimes to even adapt strategies in a large class, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible because there's a multi-sensory teaching approach that you can apply in teaching. There is also still the need for you to take patterns, observe and get data. Getting data would help you know specifically what you're dealing with. You will know when a child is struggling with comprehension. You will know when it's a morphological issue. You know when it's an issue with sound letter recognition. You will know when it's what. And even if it's a class of 41 students, you're able to know if it is Tunde that struggles with comprehension, and when it's Tolani that struggles with writing, and when it's Bola that struggles with reading, and when it's Chiamaka that struggles with, working memory. But if you don't know what each of the problem is, then you will not be able to even peer support in a way that is effective. So I would say step back and take data.
Please,
Please, can you mute yourself?
Also, please, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So you need to take data in the way that you need to, gather data so that you are able to address what the issue is. And that's how you can even take advantage of the fact that it's a large class, because it's a large class, you may not be able to do one-on-one, but if you know what the problem is exactly, then you can peer support to the way you can peer support strategically in a way that helps. And then, support that with multi-sensory teaching instructions. There's also something called structured literacy. And with structured literacy, if you're familiar with structured literacy, it's a step-by-step approach to learning literacy. When you successfully master a particular step, then that's when you're supposed to progress to the next step. And when you start intervention, especially on adults or children in primary school, if you understand structured literacy, you'll be able to identify what steps were missed. And if a step was missed, there will be difficulty in the future steps. So if you're able to identify what step was missed, if it was an issue with, sound recognition, then you can start to tackle that so that when you proceed to things like reading or spelling is easier, right? So concept you should familiarize yourself with: multi-sensory teaching approach, learning styles of your students, differentiated instructions, structured literacy, the science of reading. I will repeat myself: multi-sensory teaching approach. Please take note. Familiarize yourself with multi-sensory teaching approach, learning styles, structured literacy, differentiated instruction, and the science of reading. Did we get that? multi-sensory teaching approach, structured literacy, differentiated instructions, learning styles, and the science of reading. Familiarize yourself with all of this concept because reading is a science, learning is a science, and you cannot teach in isolation of understanding this. And in addition to understanding this concept, is also understanding the different common learning disorders that you might come across in your classroom. Note that you might come across more that is not on this list, but if you perfect your ability to gather data and understand each child's profile, then you can gather data and do your research into figuring out what the problem is if you come across a problem. Did I answer that question for you? I think it was by Titi Lope.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, Becky.
Thank you so much, Oladoyin. Thank you. I think we've come to the end of today's webinar. It's 7 p.m. already. So as a result of that, I won't be able to take more questions again. So on behalf of everybody, I want to say a big thank you to you for taking out your time to give us this lecture. We appreciate you and we look forward to having you once again with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see that people put some questions on the group. You could please maybe extract that and send to me. I can send a voice note, especially if you guys have a group, so that, because I know some people put the questions before the people who were verbally asking their questions, so that no one feels cheated. Please, thank you.
All right, man. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night. I'll be stepping out now.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you and good night.